Welcome to University Drive, your pathway to the transformational work of University of the Bahamas. Our goal is to build a better Bahamas by shaping tomorrow's leaders today, finding solutions to challenges, and forging new opportunities for growth. University Drive, where faculty, staff, students, and alumni travel the road of progress together with you.
Hello and welcome to University Drive. I'm your co-host, Nikki Bowe, and I'm excited to be back in your company for another exciting season of University Drive here on Guardian Radio. Our guest today is Dr. Ancelleno Davis, and we're going to be having a thought-provoking and an exciting conversation about all things sustainability, what it means for our country, the role of the university, and what we as ordinary citizens can do to help fight climate change and to make our world a better place. There's so much to talk about. He's a marine biologist, a sustainability coordinator, and he is, I would like to call him Mr. Sustainability himself. And so I'm excited about this conversation. Dr. Davis, welcome to University Drive.
Thank you so much for having me back on University Drive. And now that I'm here at the University of the Bahamas North Campus, I think we will be interacting a lot more even.
So let's get right into this conversation for the sake of our listening audience and for people that may not be familiar with you. Give us a little background information and insight into who Dr. Ancelleno Davis is.
Well, I'm Bahamian, born and raised on Providence. I spent a lot of my childhood years at the botanical gardens in Chippenham, where my mother used to work, and that really inspired me to get into the environmental work that I do. I've always been interested in all the animals and plants. I did a 2-year degree at the College of the Bahamas, and then I joined the Kirtland's Warbler Research and Training Program, where I was able to interact with scientists and do actual field biology and ecology work and learn about our plants and a lot of the birds that we have, snakes and things like that. And I was able to then go and do my bachelor's and master's degrees at University of Maryland, Eastern Shore through a scholarship that program provided. And I returned to the Bahamas to work for a while. I worked at the Atlantis and then at the Nature Conservancy. And eventually I returned home. I returned to the US to do my PhD in ecology, evolution, and environmental biology at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And over that time, I've been leading conservation work in the Bahamas, including starting the first coral nurseries, coordinating the Bahamas Million Tree campaign. I sit on national committees such as the National Environmental Health Services Board, the National Biodiversity Subcommittee, the National Wildlife Conservation and Trade Advisory Committee, BAWEN, which is the Bahamas Wildlife Enforcement Network Advisory Committee, and various other groups and committees. But now I'm here positioned at the University of the Bahamas North Campus in Freeport. And I recently left my position as senior scientist and policy analyst at the Bahamas National Trust. So I'm bringing all that experience to bear here to, inspire and educate the next generation of Bahamian scientists and make sure that they are able to deliver on our needs as a country.
Boy, you said a whole lot, but what stood out for me is that this was peaked as a little boy at the botanical gardens where your mom worked. And I've been to the botanical gardens and it didn't pique my interest in science and sustainability. I am not that person, but you are, and I'm happy that you are. But as a little boy growing up, did you think that having this love for science and the environment and nature would provide all of these opportunities for you? And did you envision that you could have such a fulfilling and rewarding career out of a love of science as that little boy at Botanical Gardens in Chippenham?
In all honesty, I don't think that I ever, as a child, would have said, "Oh, me liking to be inside the bush and like climbing trees and stuff had anything to do with me." I've traveled to 13 different countries. I've taught at three universities. I've worked for international groups, worked with princes and prime ministers. And honestly, as a kid, I just enjoyed being outside. And I had a lot of adults around me who would answer questions. Basil Miller, Mr. Burnside, Jeffrey Lynn. They were very patient with me as a kid with 8 million questions every day. Um, and I think just allowing me to be in their space and sharing their knowledge with me allowed me to recognize that, yeah, this is something that I could do. I know that they've all told me independently that they're proud of where I am now. And I think that that was really important early on. But no, I had no idea that it it would end up like this.
You said you were just a little boy liking to be inside the bush. And when we talk about the bush, we for different people it has a different meaning. It has, different levels of importance. For some, it's not important. For others, it's very important. When you talk about the bush, what is the role of the bush in our ecosystem, in our environment, and why should we not disregard it as just the bush?
It, this is one of those conversations that I have all the time with my family and friends and colleagues. And I'd be riding in a car with someone, and I can say, "Oh, that's an invasive species. That's an invasive species. Oh, we could eat some of that. Um, that tree is poisonous. That tree is not from the Bahamas." And they're just like, that's just bush. Let's just have a regular drive like regular Bahamians. Um, and honestly, I often say things like, "Oh, I just like being in the bush," and I kind of say it flippantly, but um, when I'm with other colleagues, I would say that I'm going into the coppice forest or the blackland coppice or the whiteland coppice or the pine forest and be very specific with my description of what type of forest that is. But I'm Bahamian through and through. So yeah, it's still the bush for me. But now I don't just see a big patch of green. I can see these, 80 or 90 different species of plants that I can identify. And I also can acknowledge their importance for the Bahamian environment. Every time it rains, what is going to absorb that water, right? The plants are sucking it up. Every time we have like some epidemic or pandemic or some new disease pops up, people return to the bush medicine and using that. We have a lot of people exploring different native remedies, different forestry products all the time, but Bahamians aren't really involved in that. And so I think it's part of my responsibility and my calling to be able to share that with others. And yeah, it's still the bush to me, but it's so much more.
So you mentioned four types of plant environments, I guess. You said coppice forest, white land, black land, and wetland. Did I get that right?
I think I said the white land, black land, and pine forest,
Oh,
but then there's
pine
also like
forest. Okay,
mangrove forests and stuff
right.
like that.
So let's talk about all of those. What are they? So explain to us what the coppice forest is, what the white land, black land, and pine forest, so that we can have an appreciation of the different types of bushes in our environment.
Okay, so pine forest, firstly, that's the areas that have pine. And we only have four islands with that. So if you're on New Providence, Andros, Abaco, or Grand Bahama, you know what a pine forest looks like. Unfortunately, if you're south of those islands, you wouldn't grow up with pine trees and pine forests around you. And those pine forests is not just pine. It has in the understory below the pine trees, there's a lot of palm that we use for like thatching and doing our basket weaving and stuff on different islands, as well as you have poison wood and other species that our abaco parrots would eat or pigeons would eat and things like that. We have mangrove forests, which are the wetlands that run along the coast of all of our islands. And those include black mangrove, white mangrove, red mangrove. And when we have major storms and hurricanes, those are the ones that are protecting our coastline from the heavy storm surge, right? And unfortunately, we're ripping out a lot of them and we don't pay as much attention or place as much value on them. And now, as you get inland from those marine areas, all that sandy soil and that area that's had sand on it for a long time, that the soil there is kind of white because of the sand. And so people would call that white land coppice. And as you go further inland on the bigger islands where the forest has been growing for a long time, all that leaf litter has fallen, animals have died over the years. There's different like feces fertilizing it, little bug parts, and all of this stuff. That rich, dark soil that you find inland, that's why we call that blackland coppice. But at the same time, these are very basic characterizations that scientists that study these environments don't use them anymore, but they are a part of our natural science curriculum in the Bahamas. And for a primary school student or an early high school student, that's appropriate for them to learn. But as we get up into higher levels, we do get a little bit more specific in terms of bioregions and biomes and different types of vegetation. But that's something that the students can come and take our plant taxonomy course and learn more about that later on.
Well, thank you for that. I learned quite a bit just now. I didn't know that only 4 islands had pine forests. I thought like all islands had pine forests. Like it's just a thing, you know? But you're right. Now that I think about some of the other islands not mentioned that I visited, I don't recall seeing pine. You spoke about, the fact that when you're driving with friends, you'll be pointing things out, what is invasive, what isn't from the Bahamas, what is edible, what may be poisonous. What are some of those things that are among us that we see all the time that are invasive species or not from the Bahamas? And do they fit in this environment? Are they a threat to the environment, or have they been able to assimilate and add value to the environment? When we talk about some of these foreign or non-native species of trees and among us.
So now I'm actually teaching I'm teaching biology for non-science majors this semester. And my students tell me that I traumatize them every class because I open their eyes or their minds to something that they didn't expect. So I just want you and our listeners to brace themselves because I'm going to just tell you some good truth right now. And this is a perspective thing. Just like you grow up on New Providence, you see the pine trees all the time. You think that's just a part of being Bahamian. A lot of the things that we see in our youth, you and I are still kind of young. We assume that those are part of the Bahamas. Poinciana Drive, and all the Poinciana trees that you see around the Bahamas. They're not native. They're not from the Bahamas. So you go to a lot of the other southern islands, you don't see Poinciana trees just growing in the bush. And when you look at those trees, you can see how many seeds they can make inside those pods that you use as shakers and you use to paint in primary school to do your little junk and rush out and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of those pods could have like 60 seeds in it. And on that tree, it could have 100, 200 pods. So now you have thousands of these seeds falling under that tree. And people will tell you, oh, that ain't invasive. They all over the place, but you don't see them taking over where the government is paying hundreds and thousands of dollars for people to sweep up and trim and remove those seeds and mow under those trees. No, they're not invasive because we're killing the seedlings when they pop up. But you go into some of those areas off of Carmichael Road where you had one Poinciana tree spring up. Now there's just a dense cluster of Poinciana trees, and they can poison the other plants that are growing under them, and they will just take over the forest. And I think a lot of people don't see it like that, but this is the same thing that happens with almond trees because we're not eating the almonds as fast as they can grow. You have casuarina, which everyone knows is invasive, but most Bahamians grew up with them on the beach. And I've heard people say like, "Oh, the wind blowing through the casuarina trees sounds so nice." Honestly, I've been on dozens of Bahamian islands, and the wind blowing on any beach sounds just as nice. And you don't have to get chick in the bottom of your foot from those casuarina fruit. And they're not cones, they're fruit. They call it the Australian pine, but it's not even a pine tree. So this tree been lying to us our whole life, right? And then you have the scavola, that bright green bush that you start seeing along all the coastlines and popping up in neighborhoods with the white fruit on it. That's invasive. The fruit is, we don't use it for anything, but horticulturalists or like nurseries, they can break a piece off of that, stick it in the ground, and it'll grow. And so they made a lot of money off of that really easily. But now it's taken over our environment. That that plant can actually climb trees. So you might have a really nice hedge, and now you have this invasive tree just taking it over, and you're losing all the flower diversity, the pollen diversity for your bees and your other insects that need some of that diversity so that then they can also go and pollinate things like our sea gray tree, which is native, our our pigeon plum and things like that. And so it's just there's a lot of invasive species in the Bahamas, and they're, to a greater or lesser extent impacting our native environment. And some of them actually cost money for us as a community, as a nation.
Listen, that was a lesson. Yes, it. Thanks for the disclaimer, so that I wasn't overly traumatized, because you couldn't tell me that Poinciana trees were not native to the Bahamas, and you're right. I mean, I'm on Poinciana Drive, being at our campus in New Providence, right? And you see, it makes a canopy across the street because there are trees on both sides that create this beautiful archway almost. Question: are the roots of Poinciana trees aggressive? And is it something like, should certain trees, because I'm thinking about this and I can see my neighbor's yard, she has this beautiful Poinciana tree. And I asked her the other day if I could have a picnic under the tree because it's so beautiful, right? With my little ones. And I was like, this is like the perfect setting. But I also noticed the roots of those trees. Like, are certain trees the type of trees and have root systems that shouldn't be planted close to buildings? And what are some of the ones that you could list off of the top of your head that could cause some damage?
Yeah, so and this is where we're talking about sustainability, right? We often import these plants and trees to the Bahamas, but we don't import the culture that's associated with them. And we don't understand exactly how they exist. So something like a casuarina tree, for example, it grows along the beach and its roots don't tend to penetrate the rock like some of our native plants would, because our native plants have evolved with this limestone environment. So they will run along the surface, and sometimes they will try to find where there's moisture and things like that, under your foundation, etc. And casuarina trees also then fall down easily because their roots are not locked into the ground like our native trees would be. So when that casuarina tree is near your building or your house, it can grow very, very tall, 50, 60 feet tall. And be very, very big at the base, but the roots are so shallow when a hurricane comes, if that is blowing towards your building, you can expect some significant damage. Then you have things like Poinciana trees, which their roots are kind of buttressed, so they actually extend up above the ground. And when you get close to a Poinciana tree, you can see how those roots stick up. And on UB's Oaksfield campus, for example, you can see near some of the casuarina trees where those roots are coming up, they are affecting the curb or the sidewalks. And so now these sidewalks are affecting, humans moving back and forth. If you have a student with accessibility issues in a wheelchair, and now how are they going to maneuver or manage to get past that? So we're thinking about sustainability in terms of not just the environment that we're impacting, but we're impacting our human lives and livelihoods. And again, Poinciana trees during major storms, they drop a lot of branches, which can become projectiles. Those seed pods can become projectiles, and they're very hard and they can damage cars and vehicles. The vehicles that are driving along Poinciana Drive, occasionally, yeah, you get a um, Poinciana pod drop on your car or hit your windshield or something like that. And who really pays for that? That type of stuff doesn't happen if you have like strong back trees on the side of the road, or if you have our Bahamian five finger and things like that.
Wow, thank you. That was insightful. So as we begin to transition, we're going to take a break pretty soon. And when we come back from that break, I want us to delve more into sustainability from what it is that we can do, or what are some of the trends that we can begin to anticipate or expect as a result of climate change, and how sustainability or sustainable practices will counteract the devastating impact of some of those things. We're going to take our first break here on University Drive. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to University Drive. I'm your host, Nikki Bow, and if you're just joining us, my guest today is Dr. Ancelleno Davis, and we're talking about all things sustainable, what it means for our environment, and invariably how it will impact our economy as well. So if you missed the first half of the show, he spoke about being a little boy growing up in Chippenham at the Botanical Gardens and how that sparked his love for nature and science and trees and wildlife and plants and all that stuff, and how he loves being in the bush. I want us to shift the conversation a little bit now and talk about global warming and climate change, which has been a buzzword in recent time, and how that will continue to impact us here in the Bahamas. You also mentioned that you are now stationed at UB North in Grand Bahama, and I'm sure we all know the impact the Dorian had on that island and its communities. When we think about sustainability from a weather standpoint, well, first of all, let me ask you, when we talk about sustainability, you mentioned it before the break, that we tend to think about the environment, but there's also the impact on human lives. What are the various aspects or areas in which sustainability has an impact?
So sustainability really is about being able to maintain your system in a way so that it can continue to be done, or your processes can continue to be carried out in a way that you enjoy it today, but you don't reduce the ability for the next generation to enjoy the same resources and activities, right? That's that when I'm talking about sustainability, that's generally what I'm talking about. And so some of the key things that we want to look at for us, we have things, I break sustainability into social, economic, and environmental, and I call it seeing sustainability, right? Socially, if you treat people in a certain way so that they can then be healthy, happy, self-actualized, educated in the area that they want, and participate in the community and economy in a positive way, that's socially sustainable. So everything that we talk about with education, healthcare, um, economics, making sure that people have jobs, that's all sustainable. Um, Economically, again, we're talking about the jobs and the education. Are people educated in a way that they can make the money that they want? But also, are we protecting our resources? So economics is not just about money, because money isn't actually a resource. Money is a tool to translate between resources. So we have things like our time, our energy, our space, and the matter, the things, the items that make up the world. Those can be sold, borrowed, stolen, shared. And how are we thinking about these in a way that we can use our land today, but still have it available for the future? If you go and clear cut a piece of land and extract all the aragonite and dig down into the groundwater table, you are able to sell that wood, you're able to sell that aragonite, and now you have a hole in the ground that maybe has water there. But once you dig into that groundwater table, now you can't drink that water anymore. And when the rain comes down, it's not going to settle in the same way. So you've permanently changed that environment so that no one for the rest of our Bahamian future can ever go bird watching in that forest, because the forest doesn't exist, right? No one can ever again build a home on that land because you've dug the land out. No Bahamian in on that property or in that area where the groundwater is connected to can have clean, safe drinking water. So now we're affecting the future use of all of those resources. But on the other hand, you have national parks that are protected areas, and people can go there any and every day to go bird watching, to go for a hike, to collect some bush medicine. The Water and Sewage Corporation has well fields throughout the Bahamas that they can continue to draw water from as long as it rains and we have storms. But if we change that, we're messing up the environment, the economics, the social systems, all of that at the same time. And um, when we're talking about sustainability, we have to think about all of those things together. And that's what I'm trying to encourage people in the Bahamas to do a little bit more, to think about the entire system and connect it.
So, question, are there resources that we have that may not exist in the future for future generations to be able to enjoy as we or as our grandparents may have enjoyed and we are now enjoying, but that resource may become scarce or non-existent or extinct for future generations?
So, beaches and forests. Right now, with the acceleration of climate change, um, we may see sea level rise that actually eliminates a significant percentage of the Bahamas, and that starts with the coastlines. So all the beaches that we're going to now that we enjoy, or those big, broad fishing flats, in some areas of Andros, you could walk out for almost a mile and not go above your knee when it's at low tide, right? But with climate change, as those sea levels rise, those places may never be exposed again, or they may become so deep that you no longer have that wading area for you to go out as a bone fisherman or as a flats fisherman. You have things like our native forests or our pine forests in particular, that you have catastrophic hurricanes and storms, and those trees, they're not prepared to be hit by hurricanes, so frequently. Here in Grand Bahama, you can see some areas that were flooded by salt water in Hurricane Matthew. And so the offspring, so that year of Hurricane Matthew, those trees that died, they left seeds in the ground. And those seeds were trying to recover. They were trying to grow up and make their own seeds. But before they could, Hurricane Dorian hit and kill them. So now that area is going to take even longer to be repopulated with pine trees, right? So some of those things, some Bahamians may never get to see that long drive in Grand Bahama with just pine trees anymore. Grand Bahama and some parts of Abaco, they won't get to experience that anymore. And then we have things like the regular impacts of health issues like dengue. You have areas that are going to be flooded more often now, areas where the water is going to sit more often as sea level rises. And so those mosquito populations, they're going to be more common. We, in our efforts to suppress the mosquito population with spraying and stuff, we're going to be killing all of our other insects. So now you're going to have those ganap and mango trees that don't have the pollinators to pollinate them. So you're not going to get as many mangoes as you used to. Our Bahamian kids won't get to see all of those pretty pink butterflies that used to be out at the cricket club and the botanical gardens. Those won't be around anymore for them to see. So there's a lot of different things that are going to be changed and impacted by climate change. But the humans are probably the most at risk because your house gets destroyed this year and you took 30 years to build that or to pay that mortgage, and you don't know if there's another storm coming in 10 years. So our Bahamians who are able to pay for a college education or to move abroad, or who have that education and have opportunities elsewhere, a lot of them are going to leave the Bahamas, and a lot of them have. And so we're going to lose our most important resource, which is our people and our culture.
Welcome to Independence Cafeteria, home of affordable, diverse, and delectable dishes that your taste buds will love. Choose from our everyday menu of baked chicken, wings, or fish fingers, or our extensive salad bar. Build your own pasta, grab something hot from the grill, or ask about our special of the day. Our full team of culinary professionals can't wait to serve you. We're located in Independence Park at University of the Bahamas' Oaksfield campus. Call us at 302-4390. Download the app or order online at www.independencecafeteria.com. Your taste buds will thank you.
Are you always on the move but need a quick meal? At Grab and Go Cafe at UB's Oaksfield campus, we understand. Grab a meal, snack, coffee, or even dessert and be on your way. Conveniently located in the Keva M. Bethel building, Grab and Go serves affordable, nutritious meals for people who don't want to waste time. In need of a pick-me-up? We proudly serve Starbucks coffee, refreshers, and a variety of hot and cold teas. We're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Grab what you need and be on your way with barely a break in your day with Grab and Go Cafe at University of the Bahamas.
Chapter One Bookstore is proud to serve the students, faculty, and staff of the University of the Bahamas and the community at large. We are the premier choice for the purchase of university textbooks and supplies, and UB logo apparel, paraphernalia, and gifts. We also carry a wide variety of school supplies, learning aids, and leisure books. Visit our copy center for all of your printing, copying, and binding needs. Chapter One Bookstore is located on the ground floor of the Michael H. Eldon Complex on University Drive. Shop with us on Monday through Saturday. You can contact us at 397-2650 or email at chapter1@ub.edu.bs. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Chapter One Bookstore. Chapter One, the premier choice.
Dr. Davis, you said quite a mouthful. You spoke about the coastal lines and sea level and beaches and forests being impacted by sea level. You spoke about mosquito populations and how, water settling will create a dengue problem and a health problem. You spoke about how other insects die, and I never even thought about that. When they spray for mosquitoes, the impact that it has on other animals, and how our native trees like mango trees and ganap trees risk being pollinated. I never ever even thought about that. But the most concerning thing you spoke about too was the impact that it is going to have on us as human beings. And you mentioned, hurricanes destroying homes, and whether or not people, after having paid on mortgages for so many years, if their homes are damaged by a hurricane, what does that mean? And do they stay? Do they leave? Let's delve a little bit more into that and the impact that climate change is going to have on us as human beings, because I think a lot of times we think about the environment, but we don't necessarily think about how all of these various events are going to impact us. You mentioned sea level rise and hurricanes. Earlier this summer, there were fires in Canada, wildfires in Canada and California. We saw record-setting temperatures all over the world, where with the heat index, temperatures were like in, the 100 degrees consistently. These are just a few things, and I'm sure as winter approaches in some parts of the world, we can expect snowstorms and blizzards and other weather phenomenons. What are some of the things that scientists are anticipating will or can or may happen, and how are we to prepare ourselves for these eventualities?
Well, I think a lot of us do get caught up and stressed out about all of these things that are happening around the world. Those temperature changes and those forest fires and stuff, there are a lot of things that go into that. But for example, when we think about the Bahamas, and this is where I want to focus the conversation, what are our natural resources that are important to us? And how do they affect our lives and livelihoods? The pine forest, for example, throughout Grand Bahama and Abaco, those pine trees that got killed by Hurricane Dorian, a lot of them are still standing. And that's actually a fire regime ecosystem. So naturally, that ecosystem causes fire within itself periodically, which then refreshes the ecosystem or restarts it so you can get more small trees and stuff like that. But those standing dead pine trees, that's a lot of firewood. So the next time a fire starts in those areas, that could be devastating, and not just for the pine forest ecosystem, which will burn hotter and longer than it normally should, but then all the people that live nearby are going to have to deal with the smoke and the long burning forest fires because of that. And how do we manage that? We honestly, with all the technology that we have in the world, there's very little that we could do to prevent another Hurricane Dorian at the point that we are at now. And that's really scary. And then we have things in the marine environment as well. The Perry Institute for Marine Resources is actually going to be doing a presentation pretty soon on the massive coral bleaching episode that's going on now. The water has gotten so warm that the coral is throwing out the algae that live inside their bodies and give them their colors. And once they do that, usually it doesn't take much for them to then die. And if those coral reefs die, that means the fish that we eat won't have a home. The lobster and conch will be affected. Everything has a knock-on effect. When you look at the environment, you can't pull one of these bricks out and not expect for the system to collapse. And so we have to engender an environment where more people understand about the environment and how it affects us. And we have to be able to study and research these things in a way that's appropriate for us in the Bahamas. And that's what we're doing here at UB North with the development of the environmental science bachelor's and master's programs and the marine science master's program, so that our students that graduate from these programs are going to be able to not just get a job in the environment, but also when they're looking to their politicians or when they're developing their community programs, they better understand how they are connected to the environment.
You said some very enlightening and thought-provoking things, particularly about the forest, the pine trees that were damaged by Dorian but still remain standing. So they're dead, but they're standing, and now they're a fire hazard. And sometimes these are things that we don't think about. And what do we do? Do we leave them, keep them standing? Do we cut them down? Like, how do you mitigate against having another possible catastrophe as a result that something that was a natural disaster?
Mhm. You know, there's in our work as conservationists and ecologists, as policymakers, as community leaders, sometimes we really need to acknowledge there's a difference between what is needed to be done, what we want to do, and what can actually feasibly be done. In the Bahamas, I would tell you honestly, we do not have the funding, the people, the mechanical resources for us to go and remove all of those standing dead pine trees. Until recently, we didn't have legislation for people to come in and collect forestry resources legally in a way that could be sustainable and could be monitored and managed. We now have a Forestry Act and a forestry department that can handle that stuff. There's just so much that we need in place for us to get towards sustainability. And some of those things, some of those goalposts actually change over time. But there's just so much that we have to think about. How can we change these things? And the Bahamas is a really strange place to work because we're both connected and separated by water. 700 islands, 3,000 rocks and keys. The management and monitoring of it is a very strange beast and a difficult one to manage. We have our colonial history that has restricted the authority into the island of New Providence, which is 3% of our land, but we have like 75% of our people there. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And honestly, the risk that we have if there is a major catastrophic storm that hits that island, we have not empowered the islands around New Providence to come to the rescue of our main population. And that everyone else will be vulnerable if the head of the country is cut off like that. And so these are things that we need to think about really intentionally for us to get towards sustainability, empowering each island so that basically we'll all be very strong trees that make an even stronger forest.
You said a lot again, right? I know I'm saying this a lot. I'm becoming repetitive. I got to find another phrase. But I want to piggyback off of a few things that you spoke about. And you said, as conservationists and ecologists and environmentalists, you are all always faced with what is needed, what is wanted, and what can actually happen. And that battle and the reality of our situation. And then you tied in the fact that we're an archipelagic nation where the water unites and separates us, and what a monster it is to be a small island developing state, but not just a single island developing state, a multi-island developing state. With the New Providence having 3% of the land mass with 75% of our country's population. And then you also spoke about the water being so warm and the impact that it is having on coral reefs and our fish and conch and lobster and our marine life. The those are all very salient points. And of course, you also spoke about empowering the other islands to kind of support and undergird New Providence should something happen. As we look towards the future of sustainability and our environment and what is going to happen, what are some of the things that we as ordinary citizens that don't have your level of exposure, education, training, and even passion, but we know that we have an obligation and a responsibility? Because I think when I think of activists and environmentalists, it's more than having just the education or the know-how. It's also something that I think is driven by passion. I don't have passion, but I have common sense, and I know that I have a role to play. And as individual citizens, we have an obligation to do our part, no matter how small. What are some of the things that we as ordinary citizens can do to be a part of this fight against climate change and become those sustainable activists in our own little right?
So some of the things that I tell my students is you never have to put down a part of yourself to pick up a degree or to do business or to be successful, right? Whatever talent you have, whatever passion you have, you can bring that to bear to make our country better. So you are doing this show and you welcomed me on. This is a great step for you, I think. You learned a bunch during this show, but all of your listeners are also learning. So I definitely encourage other radio show hosts or other presenters, other people who are doing like these award ceremonies that we hear about, the Bahamas having 50 years of independence. How many environmental scientists were celebrated during that? Thinking about how many sustainable development experts were celebrated during that. And how do we change it to make that a standard so that at any of these activities and events, we're talking about when we have our political rally, how cognizant are we of where the waste and the paper and all the flyers, where do they go after that rally? Do you have people that are partying for 4 hours and then just drift off and go home and nobody knows what happens to all the trash that's on that site? Or do you say, hey, those of you that align with my 3 letters, we're going to stay afterwards and we're going to make sure that this park is cleaner than we met it? How do we get this as a part of our culture to impassion people and say that, when we see someone throw a piece of paper out of the jitney, does that jitney driver stop and say, listen, you can't ride on my jitney if that's how you acting? This is our Bahamas, right? There's, as a Bahamian, I think any place you go, you should be able to at least know which plants are ours, which are our Bahamian plants, which are our Bahamian birds and things like that. And to say, I won't destroy or damage this. I will promote this and make it better. And today you learned about some plants that are not Bahamian, but you can go on to a website like the Leon Levy Native Plant Preserve website, and you can see about all hundreds of different Bahamian plants that you can learn about and see which ones are pretty that you might like to keep in your yard. Reach out to figure out how to get them or how to protect them and propagate them so that then you will attract those birds and butterflies to your yard. But
I need to
also,
stick a pin there and interrupt you.
yeah,
Could you repeat that website again?
the Leon Levy Native Plant Preserve.
Can
I
you
think it's
spell that for
Levy,
our listeners?
Leon Levy, Leon Levy preserve.org. I think it's levypreserve.org. But you can go on to the Bahamas National Trust website and find out about a lot of the things that they're doing. And you can think about, taking a degree or just a course at University of the Bahamas. And I'll be delivering some courses like GIS for advocacy or mapping for advocacy and the environment. so that people can know how to find things online, how to make maps, how to see where these impacts are happening, and just educate yourself about things that are going on in the Bahamas. I think education is the key to everything. And I guess it's fitting that I'm here at UB now, but just learn one thing about the Bahamas each day, and I think that would change our whole country.
Thank you so much for that tidbit. I don't know where the time went, but we're pretty much out of time. But I am definitely going to invite you to return as a guest, and I want us to be able to delve more into some of the programs that are offered, that you will teach, that people that have an interest can get into in order to learn more, like you said, about our country. And if we were to learn something different every day about our country, we will all be able to do our small part. And like you said, using whatever passion or talent you have to become that advocate. And definitely education is my talent and my passion, and this platform provides that opportunity for me to teach our listeners, like you said, about various topics. And sustainability is one that is near and dear to me, because I can see with my own eyes, and I think we all can, ways in which our islands, whether it's New Providence or some other island, is a little different from it was rather 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago when we were children, than what it is now, and how climate change and global warming is impacting that. And just before this, I was speaking with a colleague about how life was so different when we were children, and how the landscape of New Providence has even changed in terms of buildings being torn down, streets being built, what wasn't here before, what is now here, what's gone, and the impact that will have on future generations. And so he gave us a very simple understanding of sustainability. It is ensuring that the resources that we have and the systems that are put in place and the processes can be enjoyed without being reduced for future generations. So how do we enjoy them today without reducing the likelihood of their existence for future generations to enjoy? Dr. Ancelleno Davis, this has been a very interesting conversation. And like I said, I will definitely have you back. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nikki. And I look forward to our future conversations, and definitely reach out if you would like to take one of my classes. And I look forward to seeing you and our students in these coming semesters, learning more about sustainability and the environment in our country.
I'm definitely going to take you up on that. And thank you to our listening audience for tuning in today. Please join us next week, same time, same radio station. And in between, you can be sure to listen to us by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, our YouTube channel and the university's website at www.ub.edu.bs. This has been another episode of University Drive with your host, Nikki Bowe. Enjoy the remainder of your day.
University Drive is a production of the Office of University Relations and the Communications and Creative Arts Academic Unit at University of the Bahamas. All rights reserved.